I'm delighted to be here. Thank Jeff for the invitation. This is a very important group because you've got the power of the purse in your respective states. And it's a particular pleasure to be here with Ann and Sarah. And I've very much admired her organization, and I've spoken at her conferences where she identifies some of the real shortcomings of higher education. Having been a college president for 12 years, I'm kind of battle-scarred. If I ever talked about the student being the customer, or we ought to be student-centered, the faculty would say, you're trying to run this like a business. And the truth is, it is a business. I had a small college. We had, leaving aside endowment income, probably $100 million a year budget, an endowment of several $100 million. And gee, it's not a business. Well, what is it? And I think that's part of the dichotomy here and part of the issue. Sarah, of course, she and I served on this commission that Margaret Spellings organized, and Cheryl Oldham was the executive director. And actually, it just was kind of buried for a while in a storm of criticism from higher education, because we started a conversation about outcomes and data. And we ought to see what the value is of higher education. Some of it was easy access. We want more low. Everyone agrees that we want more low-income youngsters who are talented to be able to go to college, and that's what Sarah did in her previous job, and that's critical. That's the easy part, and more and better financial aid and so on. But then we talked about what's the value of higher education? What are kids actually learning, and what are the outcomes? And we proposed, we had the gall to propose that there be a database that included information of all institutions on there about, so that, you know, if you've all had kids and maybe grandchildren applying to college, you try and figure out what goes on in these places. What does it cost? What's the financial aid? What's the real price? What are the programs? What are the outcomes? What happens if you graduate? What kind of job do you get? You have to go to these basically PR websites and you find out very little. And we proposed that, or you could go to U.S. News or some other rankings, and that told you, you know, it's very anecdotal. Having filled out those forms for 12 years, let me tell you, the data in there, the objective data is fine, but 25% of it is what of, in my category, 200 and so college presidents, provosts, and admissions people. What do they think about the other 199 schools? I don't have any idea about the other 199 schools. I know about my place, but I didn't know about a place, I was at a school in Pennsylvania. What did I know about Whittier, or what do I know about Middlebury? And I was supposed to grade them, and that was 25% of the grade. You could forget it. It's just worthless. The data in there about certain things are not worthless. Alumni giving, concrete, actual data. But because it's all input-based and not outcome-based, and because the schools don't do it. So, and I'm going to come back to what I think you all ought to do. And Sarah, of course, had a distinguished career at the department. She and I didn't consult beforehand about what we're going to say, so she said about 90% of what I was going to say. But I'm going to try and pick out some things from the perspective of the business community. I'm the senior vice president at the U.S. Chamber, and my responsibilities include our education and workforce program, going from early childhood to post-secondary. It's kind of cradle to grave. And I think this subject is almost a cradle-to-grave subject, because you really, and as Sarah's comments pointed out, you can't just talk about higher education in a vacuum from what came before, because there's no real alignment. That's a kind of a term we use in education, wonking. There's no alignment between K through 12 and higher education, even within the same state. So the curriculum in many places, and some states are now beginning to deal with it. California is one that I think is making some efforts. Florida, I think, is doing a good job there. There's no alignment between what the curriculum is in K through 12 and what the curriculum is required for a high school, for a college freshman. So these youngsters, that two-thirds of them, who only two-thirds graduate on time out of high school, and about, a bunch of them now graduate, apply to college, and half of those find out they've got to take remedial courses. So it's a third don't graduate high school, a third are not really prepared for college, and a third are. Well, of the third who are not prepared for college, there's a very bitter disappointment. You've probably heard about it from your constituents. And part of it is, you ought to ask the question, are the K through 12 people talking to the higher ed people? I think that's at the beginning of this process. What you need to do is be sure they're talking, they're collaborating, and doing the kinds of things that make sure these programs are indeed aligned. The U.S. Chamber, much in the news these days. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. I'm glad to say Sarah's company has not resigned from the Chamber, even though they do not agree with us on our climate policy, but others have. But frankly, we're doing just fine. In fact, very well. And
we may agree with you. We just don't like the regulatory process.
But that's okay, because you don't have to agree on every issue, and that's what we say. I mean, you know, we want respectful arguments, and we've even, I was telling one of our board members of one of my groups, Mark Pellish, who's here from Corinthian, that I even got invited to a White House event with the President talking about STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, math, something that you all ought to be very concerned about, because that's what will help bring jobs to your state, if you've got a robust STEM education. But anyway, I got invited, and it was all very nice, and so I think we're back to where we should be, which is we agree on some issues, and we respectfully disagree on other issues, and we're about some of these subjects, whether it's climate or health care or financial reform. The Chamber has 300,000 direct members, and we've got 3,000 state and local chambers around the country, and I think many of you may be members of chambers, and it's probably our greatest asset of these state and local chambers who represent small business, medium-sized businesses, and have a real pulse of what's going on, and have very good relationship with groups like you, as well as, thankfully, members of Congress as well. And so we are very happy about that. Why, I get asked the question, why does the U.S. Chamber put a good deal of resources into education issues? There's probably, in addition to myself, 7 or 8 people who do nothing but work on education and workforce issues. Because to our members and to our chambers, it's one of their top concerns. If you look at our website and look at the 10 top competitiveness issues that we face in this country, that we believe: trade, infrastructure, taxes, regulation, tort reform, right up at the top is human capital. We cannot compete as a country unless we have the human capital. And that starts in the pre-K, we've now concluded. We weren't there before, but we're there now.